Well, it was my first day on a new job as a computer programmer. And they took me over to my desk, sat me down, walked over and plopped down on my table a 3-inch stack. It was all one big computer program. And he said, we want you to master this program so that you can maintain it and enhance it. So I needed to study the printouts. Now, I was not going to go to that 3-inch stack of paper with a preconceived idea. There was only one way that I could approach that task, and that was inductively. I had a search utility, and whenever I wanted to find out how something worked, I would look up that term using my search utility, and then from the multiple occurrences of wherever it showed up in the program, then I could figure out how that term was used. Well, God's Word is a similar situation where you have to use an inductive approach. You can't go to it with a preconceived idea. Sure, you may find a verse that substantiates your theology, but that verse might be mistranslated. That verse might have a textual variant in it. That verse might have an Palestinian culture issue that you don't understand. You need to be honest and go to the Word and search it out. And our search utility is Young's Concordance. Or you can do the same kind of thing with a computer program. One of the nifty things you can do with a computer program is look for proximity searches or phrases much easier than you can with the books. Those are real neat. Where a proximity search is where you want to find wherever two words are used within so many words of one another. I think we should use the inductive approach. It should be even used with concepts that we think we know, because we want to get rooted. We want to get established. We want to be able to understand the Word. We want to research the Word. See, we want to deepen and establish those things that we already know, because the deepest kinds of errors are the ones that occur when you think you know it, when you don't. And like it says in Matthew 7, if the light, quote unquote, that is in us is really darkness, how dark is it? A lot of Christianity is wonderful, but people need to understand the terms that are used. You need to make it your own. Somebody may have paraphrased a term, or somebody may have taught a term long ago, and so then we parrot it and we think we know what it means until you have to use it, and then thud. It's like that basketball looks like a basketball, but it's lost its air. You need to apply things in order to really understand them. You know, you parrot all this stuff, and that's how traditions start. That's how things get watered down. So you need to be willing to re-examine the evidence and make it your own. A lot of Christians, they read one verse and then they think they know what the topic is. Well, that's sort of like doing an exit poll analysis by only interviewing one voter. Would you be able to successfully predict the winner of that election? No. You need to have a larger sample and inductively study it so that you can see what it is. So when you do a word study, you need to think analytically. You've got to ask yourself those little questions: who, what, when, where, how, why, to whom, etc. When you do that, that will help you. And another thing that will help you is being detail-minded. Now, you can't say, okay, I'm going to be detail-minded today. No, you be detail-minded every day. So in other words, how you build that is if you see trash on the floor, pick it up. If you see problems, solve them. Go to where there is need. And if you make that a habit in your life, then when the detail is there in the Word and you need to see it, you'll see it, because principles transfer. So like when you learn how to ride a bicycle, that'll help you ride a motorcycle. They're similar. And so principles will transfer. It's not like we can compartmentalize our life and live one way under one circumstance and live another way under another circumstance. That's being double-minded. That doesn't work. That's unstable. If you want to learn how to work the Word, then be detail-minded. Make it happen in all aspects of your life. And then when it comes time to work the Word, you'll have that as a background. You'll be able to work the Word. When you work the Word, you need to give it your best thought. You need to give it your best work. When you go to work the Word, don't go if you're angry. don't work the Word if you're frustrated or if you have some turbulent emotion going on in your life or deep issues under stress. Take care of the need, then go work the Word. Otherwise, you can come up with the wrong conclusions, being driven by emotion. Let the steam off. If you're feeling that way, then just read it. Don't get out your concordance and try to prove something. Just read it. That's when you need to read it, especially the Psalms. The Psalms are wonderful when you have emotions going on in your life because David went through all of those emotions. And it's remarkable how in the Psalms he states the emotion and you say, yeah, I felt like that. I know exactly what he feels like. And then what he does is he brings it around to the Word. So that's why the Psalms are so useful. See, the Word requires our best and our clearest and our most disciplined thinking. Like I said earlier, you don't need to be an intellectual to do a Word study. All you got to do is have that hunger and just keep on seeking. And it may take some people a little bit longer than others. Well, that's okay. I don't care how long it takes, just as long as you get blessed that you get the results. And God's Word is written so a fool need not err therein. So it's available to understand it. You just have to overcome those hurdles, which are the language and the culture, etc. And that takes work, but that work pays off. And you might not be able to put into PhD language, but you'll be able to understand it. And since the Word is perfect, one of the attributes of perfection is order and patterns. The existence of a pattern is a signal. It means follow that pattern. You look and see what it says. That's what inductive work is. You're looking for patterns. Let's go to John chapter 5. Because do you think that Jesus Christ knew how to study the Word? Sure, absolutely. And you know what? He told us how to do it. He explains how to study right here in John chapter 5, verse 39. Jesus said, "Search the Scriptures, for in them you think ye have eternal life." He was talking to the Pharisees. And then he said, "And they are they which testify of me." So he said, look, you Pharisees, you think you have eternal life, but search the Scriptures and see what it really says. The word search is the clue. The Greek word for search means to track, like a dog would track its quarry. Have you ever seen a dog track its quarry? Ho hum, I think there's a raccoon over here. I think I'll go over. No, dog doesn't do that, does it? It's, it's following it. It's excited. The tail's going, right? Okay, all 5 doggy senses are riveted. He's really into it. And he goes over there and sniff, and he's real excited. Well, that's what we need to do. We need to involve ourselves, all 5 senses, in the Word, except maybe taste it, I guess. But anyway, to get into it, that dog puts his nose to the ground and he's running over there and he's really involved. And what does he do? Every time the quarry did something, he sniffs all around it. Goes over here, sniffs, goes over here, sniffs. That's what we need to do to work the Word. We track the Word through and we put our nose in the book. We get involved. It's not, ho hum, yeah, I think this is really interesting. No, you get into it. See? All your 5 senses are into it. You give it your best thinking. And boy, research is not boring. It's life. Sure, it's work. You can't afford to let yourself fall asleep at the switch, but it's life. We can munch on every word. Now, I showed you before how many Greek words and Aramaic and Hebrew don't just have one meaning. What you do is when you're studying your word, if you see a contradiction or something that just doesn't quite fit, well, maybe what you've got there is another meaning. Usually the word that you're studying, hopefully, it just does not have one instance of this additional meaning. Because then you're kind of in trouble. Not necessarily trouble, but it's just more difficult. Hopefully, the word you're studying has 2 or 3 instances of this additional meaning so that then you can corroborate, yes, this is a different meaning. Sometimes it doesn't. And so in that case, you would need to go to a more developed dictionary to see if there are instances of this other meaning. For example, that Liddell and Scott Greek dictionary or the Brown Driver Briggs Hebrew, it'll list the alternate meanings, and then you can see if what you're seeing in the word is what the scholars saw. Check yourself out. The scholars are not always right, but most of the time they're pretty much on the ball, and so you can go and you can see. But when you work the word, sometimes what I like to do is the first thing I do is I derive the raw, quote-unquote, meaning of the word. I look at the root word and I look at the prefix. Now, doesn't always pan out, like with butterfly, but I like to see the flavor, what the word is made up of, and maybe there'll be some notion of that in its final meaning. But I like to see that. And then I like to look at the first usage. For example, let's go to Matthew 8. The first usage, you go sniff around, all around the first usage, and see all kinds of traits. Now, maybe you won't see these traits that much until you begin working the word later on, but then you keep going back to the first usage and re-sniffing. You keep going back to the first usage and see if those patterns show up. And so in Matthew chapter 8 and in verse 9, this is the first occurrence of doulos. Jesus was talking to the centurion, and the centurion said to him in verse 8, "Lord, I'm not worthy that you should come under my roof, but speak the word only, and my servant shall be healed. For I am a man under authority, having soldiers unto me, and I say to this man, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes, and to my servant, do this, and he does it." This is the first occurrence of doulos, bondslave. And what does he simply do? What he's told. Do this, and he does it. That's who a servant is. Isn't that simple? The first occurrence of the word pray is in Matthew 6. Right with the Lord's Prayer. That whole section is repeated over and over and over again. So the first occurrence has all those wonderful things with the Lord's Prayer with it. So first usage is very important, and you need to think analytically, use that inductive approach when you're studying, and look for alternate meanings. Don't try to shoehorn everything into one meaning, because there aren't very many words that do only have one meaning. And you have to look up every occurrence. Don't be lazy. We're workmen, because you may have a hypothesis about what this word means until you look at all the occurrences, and then maybe your theory gets blown up the last one you look at. You have to look at every occurrence. And that means you have to go back in the back of Young's Concordance and see what the alternate English translations of that word are. And then you have to look them up in turn, look at all of them. Or you have to use your Tyndall Word Study Concordance or your Englishman's Greek Concordance or Englishman's Hebrew Concordance. A little bit easier because they're all listed under one heading and you don't have to go back and forth and back and forth. And the newer Word Study Concordances have the Strong's numbers in them. So you look at every occurrence. But in order to see every occurrence in the proper light, what I like to do when I work it, I like to use the interlinear. I don't look it up in my King James. Now, it takes a little bit longer, but you'll see stuff. If you know a little bit of Greek, if you know prepositions, and if you know a little bit of Greek words, you'll see stuff. I guarantee it. You'll see interesting things that you wouldn't see ordinarily if you were working it in English. And also what you'll see is if there's any textual variance, because many times the one verse that's odd, people will gravitate toward that and they'll base theories on it or whatever, denominations sometimes on it, and there's a textual variant there. Now, if you don't have an interlinear and you want to see if there is a textual variant, then what you do is you go back into the back of the Tyndall Word Study Concordance or the Englishman's Greek Concordance, and there in the back it's got this very valuable comparative concordance of various readings. And so it goes through and shows if there are any variants with that word that you're studying. And this one includes Westcott and Hort. So this has all of the 19th century critical Greek texts in it. Because the other one, the apparatus in the Berry's interlinear, it does not include Westcott and Hort. So you have quite a bit of information in here. And so you can go and look up your word and see if there are any textual variants, because you may have counted all your occurrences and miss one. Now, one thing that I want to caution you about is there may be some significance to the numerical position of these, but there may not. So I've heard people who have done word studies, and they say the first occurrence is this, and the second occurrence is this, and the third occurrence is that, and the fourth occurrence is that, and the fifth occurrence is this. And they say that, with the fifth occurrence, that 5 is the number for grace, and 6 is the number for the world, and 7 is the number for perfection, and 8 is the number for growth, and 9 is the number for new beginning, etc. And so they try to look for inferences, numeric significance in the first usage, the second usage, the third usage. Now, if it comes out and bites you on the butt, if it's so apparent, then great. It's possible. It's definitely possible. But if it's not there, don't squeeze it, especially with numerics. See, there are some things that if I'm studying, I'll say this is worthy of primary evidence. But then there are other things that are more subjective, that they are in the category of interesting. But I am not going to base a conclusion solely upon the numeric position of a word. Or I'm not going to base something solely upon what I can infer from structure. I don't know structure well enough to do that, and I'm willing to admit it. There are some things with structure I can see right off, and it's very apparent. But there are other things I look in Bullinger and I say, how do you get that? And with numerics too, you got to be careful. There's ways you can take it too far. There's a book by Pannon, I think it is, talking about numerology, where they assigned a numeric value to each letter, and then each word has a numeric value. I don't know about that. It's interesting. But who put the letters of the alphabet in order? Did God? Well, if he wrote with the finger of God and he invented the alphabet with Moses, yeah, maybe. But if the Phoenicians did it, so why is A 1 and B 2 and G 3 and D 4? Who assigned that? Did man or God? So I don't know. And see, you can make numbers almost do anything. If you've read the book, you can see how they make conclusions, and they seem valid. But I've seen statistics do anything. Just listen to a government report, right? So the jury is still out on that one. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's there. I don't know yet. I'm willing to say I don't know everything. There might be something to it. But I'm not going to jump on that bandwagon quite yet. But, so you look for every occurrence. You use your interlinear. You use this table in the back. And then what I do, I write up a tentative definition of what I think it is based upon what I've seen. Then I go to the lexicons. I don't like to go to the lexicons first. It's just me. Okay, maybe you think differently. Maybe it would be good for you to go to the dictionaries first, then do your word study and corroborate things. I like to just go to the word first. That's just me. And I'm not going to legislate my method on you. But anyway, what I do is I go to the word first, then I go to the lexicons, and it helps me frame what I've seen into words. And also sometimes if I'm wrong, and I've been wrong before, if I'm wrong, then I'll see, oh yeah, okay, I missed this. I missed it, and there it is. And I go back and look, and yeah, they're right. One thing you always want to do, if you really want to be precise, is check the synonym, because we may think a word has a more broad meaning than when it really does. And so this aspect of the word over here may actually be occupied by a synonym. So if you really want to be precise, you do the synonyms. It's great to know the difference between lambano and decomai, isn't it? Well, the only way you're going to figure that out, if you just do a word study of lambano, you might miss some of it, see, until you do decomai as well, and then you can see the difference between the two. It takes work, but once you're done, you can speak with thus saith the Lord authority, right? And you can know that you know, and there's no substitute for that. You cannot hitchhike on somebody else's faith. That's your own burden. Like it says in Galatians 6, bear ye one another's burdens. Then it goes on to say everyone must bear their own burden. Well, your relationship with God is in the category of your own burden. Your knowledge of the Word is within the category of your own burden. Your believing for things is your responsibility. I can't believe for you. I can't study the Word for you. You can't hitchhike. You need to make it your own. Sometimes, if I'm doing a word study just before teaching, then I go out and teach it if I know it. But if I'm not sure about it, I'm not going to teach it. I'll pick a different subject. All right, even at the last minute, I've done the study and I'm ready to teach, and it's just not right. I don't know it. Well, should you teach what you don't know? No. So just pull something out of your file that you've taught before and teach it. There's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes you need to incubate things and then double check them with a fresh mindset. When it comes to alternate meanings for a Greek word, when you do a word study, there are alternate meanings that are affected by its grammar. For example, akouo means to hear. And if akouo is followed by a genitive case object, then it means to hear it, but you don't understand it. If akouo is followed by an accusative case object, that means hear it and you understand it. So the meaning of the verb in Greek is affected by the case of its object. Now, the same thing's true with worship. The word worship is proskuneo, and proskuneo can take either a dative case object or accusative case object. When proskuneo has an accusative case object, then that means to worship, like we think adoration, praise, prayer, worship towards God. But when a proskuneo has a dative case object, that does not mean that kind of worship. It means to salam, to prostrate yourself on the ground in front of, like they did in that culture. The Japanese people bow. We shake hands. Well, when they came into a presence of a holy man, they would prostrate themselves. And that is called proskuneo. So when Jesus Christ is worshipped, and it does say that he was worshipped, it's always dative case. It's never accusative case. He's not worshipped the same way God is. Isn't that interesting? So there's grammatical things that are involved here. For example, the word histemi, to stand. When histemi has a direct object, when it is transitive, then it means to cause to stand. But when histemi has no object, it's intransitive, it means to stand on your own. So the meaning of the verb is affected by grammar, by how it's used in the sentence. Also with Greek, they have voices. They have active, passive, and middle. For example, the word loose in the active, he loosed the camel. He loosed the horse. In other words, he let it go. But when loose is used in the middle voice, this would be reflexive in English, where he loosed for himself. That means to ransom. The word is changed in meaning because of its voice. So there are grammatical things that are used there. And then, like with the Hebrew, remember, there's the three kinds of Hebrew. There's the simple and the intensive. Those are the tenses with Hebrew. And so you have kill, murder, and massacre. The tense of the verb affects its meaning. Sometimes the singular and the plural will affect a meaning. For example, we've seen his star in the east, and wise men came from the east. There's two different meanings there, because wise men, they came from the plural east, the risings. In other words, the direction east. But we have seen his star in the east. That's singular. We've seen his star in the sunrise. Sometimes there are relational or relative meanings where it's potential or actual or causal or instrumental. It's the cause of, the result of, the process of this, the state of this, it's capable of this, the agent or instrument of this, the beginning or end of this. There's a whole bunch of these. Then the context can affect the meaning. If there's a lot of different meanings, for example, there may be athletic terminology. And for example, in 2 Corinthians 10, there's a whole bunch of athletic terminology. 2 Corinthians was written right around the time of the Olympiad and the Olympics in Corinth. Paul must have been in the stands and seen it and got inspired. That terminology is in 2 Corinthians. Also, there are mercantile usages. To redeem the time has a mercantile usage, to buy up all the time. You could have a military meaning. You could have a legal meaning. For example, in Hebrews 11:3, believing is the substance of things hoped for. The word substance is hypostasis. It means that which stands under, is the raw meaning, but it doesn't ever have that meaning anywhere. That's just the essence of the meaning. But how it's applied, a hypostasis could be a foundation if it's in terms of a building. Or if it's legal, a hypostasis could be a title deed, which is the foundation legally for your ownership. Believing is the title deed. It could have a nautical term, a nautical meaning. For example, sailors. Sailing and agriculture they were trades back then, very well known. So, for example, if you go to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, in verse 3, let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come except there come a falling away first, and apostasia. Now, some people say that means the apostasy and everybody's going to reject the Lord. Well, they've been doing that for centuries. Apostasia. Apo, from, stasia, stand. The raw meaning is a standing away from. Well, apostasia has a nautical application where the ship comes in, but there's no dock. And when the ship comes in to embark, to offload cargo and passengers, and there's no dock, what does it do? It stands offshore, and the little boats go out to it. That's a snapshot of the gathering together. Jesus Christ, the boat, is going to come and stand offshore, and us little boats are going to go out to him. That's a nautical application. So there could be agricultural application, or religious, or philosophical. Hypostasis also has a philosophical understanding, where it is a foundational premise. And in Hebrews chapter 1, Jesus Christ is the express image of his person. Well, express image is character. We get the word character from it. Person is hypostasis. So Jesus Christ was the character. He was the marker. He was the one who showed God's hypostasis, his foundational plan, what God stood for, what he was the star of God's show, how we could say it. But anyway, there's a number of different meanings that can be affected by how the word is used in context. That's contextual inference. We'll get into this a little bit more. There could be cultural Semitic meanings. There could be figurative meanings. Thayer is very good for things that are metaphorical meanings. You can see this. He shows it. Now, sometimes if you're doing a word study and there are only a few occurrences, or if the meaning that you're studying, if you have an alternate meaning and only has one representative of that, what are you going to do? Well, you can look at some of the lexicons that bring in Koine Greek of the same time period, and they may have these other meanings. For example, in Bauer's, now Thayer doesn't do this as much, but in Bauer's lexicon, Arndt and Gingrich is another name for it, they'll have Koine Greek in there. The Liddell and Scott, remember the final word in Greek, like the Oxford Dictionary, the big one? They'll bring in other meanings. Another one I didn't mention is Moulton's lexicon. Now this one is solely based on the Greek papyri, the Greek papyrus documents. What they did is they found a bunch of papyrus documents in dumps and other places that had scribbling on it from day-to-day use, profane use, grocery lists, legal documents, etc., letters, whatever. And so they did a contextual inference studies on these. They saw how these words were used, and they could see how the everyday person in that era used words. And so, not Bible at all. profane literature. But you can see examples that might help if you only have one representative of that meaning in the Bible, and then you can see corroboration for it in these papyri. So that Moulton's is very, very good. Kittle's Theological Dictionary in the New Testament or the Theological Dictionary of the Old Testament will go into that too, those alternate meanings. So that's really neat. Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to apply what we've learned here, and we're going to do another word study. What I want to do is take a look at a word and put it through all of its traces. So I've chosen the word oikonomos, which is the steward of a household. But what I want to do is I want to do this in an analytical fashion. And we're going to do who, what, when, where, why, how. And we're going to find a number of patterns. So what I like to do is I like to put vertical lines down my paper so I have columns. We'll put it through this inductive process. So the first occurrence of oikonomos is in Luke chapter 12. So let's go there to Luke chapter 12, verse 42 and verse 43. And let's take a look. It says, "And the Lord said, Who then is that faithful and wise steward, whom his Lord shall make ruler over his household, to give them their portion of meat in due season? Blessed is that servant whom his Lord, when he comes, shall find so doing." Who is the steward? What does it say about the steward here in this section? Who is the steward? Well, he's a ruler. So here's what I'm going to do. Down the first column, the one to the left, I am going to put the reference, which is Luke 12, 42, 43. All right? And then the first column, I am going to title ruler. He's a ruler. The first column, so I have right here, down this side, Luke, and then the next column is ruler. He's a ruler. What can you tell me about this steward? What traits does he have? He's faithful. So the third column, I'm going to put faithful. And the fourth column, he is wise. Now, maybe we won't see much more yet. Maybe after we do the next occurrence, then we'll see some more things and we can go back and see what else is in common. So this is real interesting, though, because if you look at the traits of this ruler, this steward, in his first usage, a steward is someone who is the ruler over a household. And what is he supposed to do? Is he supposed to lord it over them? Is he supposed to abuse them? Is he supposed to rule them? His task is to give them their portion of meat in due season. This is first occurrence stuff. So if a person's going to be a ruler, their job is to know their people, to bring out the best in them, to give them what they need, and to give them what they need when they need it, and to know what their portion is, because not everybody needs the same portion, right? And also, that person has to be diligent, because blessed is that person that's doing what he's supposed to do when the Lord comes. Also, he has a Lord. He's responsible to someone. So he is a ruler. He's faithful. He's wise. Okay? Real interesting. So now, let's go and look at the next occurrence of the word, and that is in Luke chapter 16. So now what I'm going to do, on the next line down in column number 1, I'm going to put the reference, Luke 16, 1 through 13. Now, let's see if any of these things that we saw as traits in the first usage show up here. Luke 16:1. He said to his disciples, there was a certain rich man who had a steward. The same was accused unto him that he'd wasted his goods. And he called him and said unto him, How is it that I hear this of thee? Give an account of thy stewardship, for thou mayest be no longer steward. Then the steward said within himself, What shall I do? For my Lord may take away from me the stewardship. I cannot dig. I'm not going to be able to do manual labor, and I'm not going to beg. So what am I going to do? I am resolved what to do. That when I'm put out of the stewardship, that other people might receive me into their houses. So he called one of his Lord's debtors to him and said, How much do you owe, my Lord? And he said, 100 measures of oil. And he says, take your bill quickly, sit down and write 50. Pay it now. Then said he to another, and how much do you owe? And he said, 100 measures of wheat. And he said to him, take your bill and write 80. And, verse 8, the Lord commended the unjust, quote-unquote unjust steward, because he had done wisely. For the children of the world are in their generation wiser than the children of light. And I say to yourselves, make yourselves friends of the mammon of unrighteousness, that when you fail, they may receive you into everlasting habitations. Verse 10, he that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much, and he that is unjust in the least is unjust also in much. If therefore you've not been faithful in unrighteous mammon, who will commit to your trust the true riches? And if you've not been faithful in that which is another man's, who shall give you that which is your own? No man can serve two masters, for he'll either hate the one and love the other, or else he'll hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. So now, let's go and look. First of all, in Luke 12, he was a ruler, right? Is he a ruler here? Is he? It doesn't really say, does it? So we'll skip over that one. He's not a ruler. But how about faithful? Is he supposed to be faithful? Does faithful show up there? Right, but it actually says faithful, right? And how many times does it say faithful there in that passage? You count them up, it's actually 4. What I do is, on line number 1, where we were in Luke chapter 12, there was one occurrence of faithful. So I put an X under faithful right there. Then, in Luke chapter 16, verse 1 through, and it's actually all the way through verse 13, I put faithful 4X, 4 times. So in that column, 4X, right? He's faithful 4 times. Now, does wise show up there in that context? Yes. How many times? Well, if you look, wise shows up 2 times. I put 2X. Now, there's something else here. If I go back and look, he's the steward. If I go back and look at Luke chapter 12 and then look here in Luke chapter 16, there's also something else that's in common, and that is he's a servant, right? He's a servant. In Luke chapter 12, he is a servant, so now I'm going to make a new column, a servant column. He's a servant in Luke chapter 12. In Luke chapter 16, how many times is he a servant? If you read through it, Luke chapter 16, no man can serve 2 masters, right? You see it? So serve is used. And now also, if I think about it, in Luke chapter 12, he had a Lord, right? And he was responsible. Now in Luke 16, does he have a Lord? Is he responsible? Right, he's accountable, he's responsible. So now I'm going to make a 5th column, another column, responsibility, or has responsibility. And I'm going to put an X in both because he has responsibility. So far we see that the traits of a steward are that he's a ruler, he's faithful, he's wise, he's a servant, and he has responsibility. Isn't that interesting? So now let's go and let's look at the next one, Romans 16:23. If you did a study, if you went ahead and looked in your Young's Concordance, looked up all the occurrences of oikonomos, you'd see where they are. And the next one is in Romans 16:23. I salute Gaius, my host, and of the whole church who salutes you. Erastus, the steward of the city, salutes you, and Quartus, a brother. So he is the steward of the city. Well, what is that? That's like a political office, almost like treasurer. So he would be a ruler. It doesn't really say it. So I'm going to put for Romans 16. I am going to put an X under ruler, but I'm going to put it in parenthesis. That's how I show it's inferred. And also, does he have responsibility in a political position in the city? Yes, I'm going to put an X there, and I'm going to put that in parentheses. But does it say anything about him being faithful or wise there in that context? No. And see, now when I do this, I'd look not only at the verse that uses the word, but I look at the whole context surrounding it. And what I do is I look at the whole paragraph, because that's the way I can get the contextual inference. See, I can see its effect. All right. The next occurrence of oikonomos is 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 1. So this next column, 1 Corinthians 4:1. It says, "Let a man so account of us as of the ministers of Christ and stewards of the mysteries of God. Moreover, it is required in stewards that a man be found," what? Faithful. So does that fit with the pattern we've seen so far? Yes. First of all, ministers of Christ. Ministers, those are a form of a servant, right? So I put an X. 1 Corinthians 4:1, I'm going to put an X under servant, because a minister is a servant. And are we responsible? Yes, we're stewards of the mysteries, right? We have to take care, so we have responsibility. I'm going to put an X with a parenthesis there in that column. Moreover, it's required in stewards that a man be found what? Faithful. So I'm going to put an X in the faithful column. Now, isn't this interesting? See, we're seeing a pattern developing. Galatians chapter 4, verse 2. Here it says, "But is under tutors and governors," stewards, "until the time appointed of the Father." So this is talking about people who take care of children, and they're under stewards, under governors, under stewards. So does someone who takes care of children, do they have responsibility? Very much so. So Galatians 4:2. They have responsibility, all right? Are they a ruler? Yeah, yes, absolutely. I'm going to put an X with a parenthesis around it, because they have to be a ruler. Are they a servant? Is a nanny a form of a servant? Yes, I'm going to put an X with a parenthesis around it there. That fits this pattern. Very interesting. Titus chapter 1, 6 through 9. And see, this is not difficult to do, but you have to go back and forth and back and forth. The first time you read it, you may not see the terms that are there. But if you go back and forth after a while, you're going to see 3, 4, 5, sometimes as many as 8 different patterns that are used in association with this term. Titus chapter 1, verse 6. "If any be blameless, the husband of one wife, having faithful children, not accused of riot or unruly, for a bishop must be blameless as the oikonomos, the steward of God, not self-willed, not soon angry, not given to wine, no striker, not given to filthy lucre, but a lover of hospitality and a lover of good men, sober, just, holy, temperate, holding fast the faithful word as he hath been taught, that he may be able by sound doctrine both to exhort and to convince the gainsayers." Now, what can you see right away? Faithful, right? Holding fast the faithful word. He's a steward. He's holding fast the faithful word. So I'm going to put an X under faithful. He's a bishop. He's a form of a ruler, right? So I'm going to put an X under ruler. Is he responsible? Yes, he's responsible. Also, look at this. A bishop must be blameless as a steward of God, not self-willed, not soon angry, not given to wine, no striker, not given to filthy lucre. Now, if you go back and look at Luke chapter 12, look at verse 44, "Of a truth I say to you that he'll make him ruler over all that he hath. But, and if that servant say in his heart, my Lord delays his coming, and shall begin to beat the men servants and maidens, and to eat and to drink and to be drunken, the Lord of that servant will come in a day when he looks not for him, and in an hour when he's not aware, and will cut him in sunder, and will appoint with him his portion with the unbelievers." It's available for the steward to abuse his privilege, right? And in Titus, he's supposed to not be angry, not given to wine, not a striker, not filthy lucre. So I'm going to make another column and put not abusive. that make sense? And I'll put an X under Luke 12, and I'll put an X under Titus. Let's go on to the next occurrence, 1 Peter chapter 4. Here is verse 10. As every man hath received the gift, even so minister the same one to another as good oikonomos of the manifold grace of God. If any man speak, let him speak as the oracles of God. If any man minister, let him do it as of the ability which God gives, that God in all things may be glorified through Jesus Christ, to whom be praise and dominion forever and ever. So here, he is a servant. Even so, minister the same, right? If any man minister, let him do it as of the ability. A minister will serve. So I'm going to put servant in here 2 times, 1 Peter 4:10, and I'll put under the servant column, I'll put 2X. Also, is he responsible? Sure, he's responsible. All right, so now, these columns allow you to do the who, what, when, where, why, how, and see what things you have in common. So we can tell right now that an oikonomos is a ruler of a household, but he has responsibility himself because he is a servant of someone else, and it's his responsibility to take care of those people and not be abusive, to give them their meat in due season when they need it, and he has to be faithful and he has to be wise in order to do this. This is what I'm calling signpost words. These concepts intertwine. This is all contextual inference that works in harmony to help us understand what this word's all about. If you look at a steward, he will be a ruler, he will be faithful, he will be wise, he will have to be a servant, he has responsibility. Isn't that interesting to see? Every time I've done word studies in the last decade, I have seen this kind of thing. Okay, now, what I want to do, though, is I would like to now do another word in this word family with oikonomos, steward. I'm going to look at the word oikonomia. And you know what's interesting? If you want to pronounce words correctly, you can look in the Greek dictionary and you can see where the accent is. And so it's not oikonomia, it's oikonomia. But you have to put the emphasis on the right syllable, okay? And the way you do it is you look at where the accent mark is. So it's oikonomia. So now, if we do oikonomia, the first occurrence of that is in Luke 16:2, where we need to give an account of our stewardship. And in Luke 16:3, he takes me away from the stewardship. And Luke 16:4, when I'm put out of the stewardship. So what I would do is under 1 Peter chapter 4, maybe I'd grab a different color or pen or something. I would put Luke 16 again down there. And this oikonomia is in the same pattern as oikonomos because it's right there with Luke 16. There's faithful 4 times, there's wise 2 times. I just copy down what I had in the column in the row for Luke 16:3. So he's a ruler, he's faithful 4 times, he's wise twice, okay, he's a servant, and he has responsibility. It's said in the same breath as all those other ones. Let's go to 1 Corinthians 9:17. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, and let's do verse 16. Paul says, "For though I preach the gospel, I have nothing to glory of, for necessity is laid upon me, yea, woe is unto me if I preach not the gospel. For if I do this thing willingly, I have a reward. But if against my will, an oikonomia of the gospel is committed to me. What is my reward then? Verily, that when I preach the gospel, I may make the gospel of Christ without charge, that I abuse not my power in the gospel." So, are there any things that fit this pattern that we have seen? Yes. First of all, he cannot be abusive, right? So we put an X in the last column. And is he responsible? Whoa, yeah, necessity is laid upon me. Does this fit that same pattern? Sure. He has to do the right thing. And now I have servant in my notes here, and I don't see it in here. Verse 19. Ah, there it is. For though I be free from all men, yet have I made myself servant unto all, that I might gain the more. Thank you. So I put an X in the servant column. So you see, this is part of that same pattern. Now let's go to the next one, Ephesians. Ephesians chapter 1 and in verse 10. We'll begin in verse 9. Having made known to me the mystery of his will, according to his good pleasure, which he hath purposed in himself, that in the administration, oikonomia, of the fullness of times, he might gather together in one all things in Christ, both which are in heaven and which are on earth, even in him. Now, is there a ruler there? Is there a servant there? Is there faithfulness there? Is there being wise there? Is there responsibility there? No. This does not fit that pattern. Interesting. We may have a separate meaning. This is how you prove alternate meanings. You look at the contextual inference and it will tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt. You can't stick your own meaning in there if you wanted to. You got to put the word's meaning in. Let's see what this pattern might be. Ephesians chapter 3, verse 2. If you've heard of the oikonomia of the grace of God which is given me to youward, how that by revelation he made known to me the mystery, as I wrote afore in a few words, whereby when you read you may understand my knowledge of the mystery of Christ. Again, any ruler, any servant, any faithfulness, any being wise, any being responsible? No. But let's look back at Ephesians 1:10 and let's see if Ephesians 1:10 and Ephesians 3:2 have anything in common, a different set of concepts perhaps. So, does anyone see anything off the bat? Mystery shows up in both of them, right? So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of the columns and we'll put mystery down at the bottom of column number 2 where it says ruler, the ruler column. We're going to put mystery down there. We're going to reuse that column. That'll make it a little easier. And so there's a mystery in Ephesians 1:9, right? So I'm going to put an X right there. And in Ephesians 3:2, there's actually mystery twice. 2X. Okay. Now, what also is in common between there? Is there anything else? Yes, made known. In Ephesians 1:9, having made known unto us, right? Ephesians 3:2, having made known to me the mystery. So, making known, that's another thing that's part of this same context. So now in column number under faithful, I'm just going to relabel that make known. Now what else? Ages. Where's ages show up? And what is it? What's the corresponding term in 1:10? Fullness of times. Times and ages. Now look at Colossians 1:25. Here it says, whereof I am made a minister according to the oikonomia of God, which is given to me for you to fulfill the word of God, even the mystery which had been hid from ages and from generations, but is now made known to his saints, to whom God would make known what is the riches of the glory of this mystery among the Gentiles, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory. Now you can see the ages pattern is part of this. Does that make sense? Mystery shows up there, right? Make known shows up twice, and ages shows up once. So I'm going to put an X in Ephesians 3:2, Colossians 1:25, and there's an X in Ephesians 1:10 because it has to do with times. We have a separate meaning of oikonomia, right? Now, this is really interesting. You can do this with all words to use their contextual inference. 1 Timothy 1:4. Here's another fascinating use of this method. Chapter 1, verse 3, as I besought thee to abide still at Ephesus, when I went into Macedonia, that thou mightest charge some that they teach no other doctrine, neither give heed to fables and endless genealogies, which minister questions, rather than godly oikonomia, which is in faith. Now that seems kind of odd, but if you go to the interlinear part and look, right at the end of verse 4, there's a G, footnote, and that is oikonomion, and the hash mark is right at the end of the word there in the bottom line of the Greek part. This variant only involves one word. The G in the apparatus, it is oikodomion. Oikonomion versus oikodomion. Administration versus building. Now they're very similar in sound, oikonomion, oikodomion. This is really interesting. Oikodomion only has one text that says it should be that, not Glttraw. One would tend to say that oikodomion is probably not right. However, we now have a way of proving which one is right by looking for the pattern. The right textual variant should fit the pattern. So, if you look at what the other textual critics say, the Nestle text and the UBS text don't even show this variant. If we go and look at each textual critic's texts, some of them might have listed this where they've cited the manuscripts, but did not adopt it. Base's critical Greek text did have oikodomia. If you go to Griesbach preferred oikonomion, but he said Codex D, which is from the 6th century, which is not that young. And some church fathers supported oikodomia. Now, what do I mean by church fathers? The church fathers published what we would call Sunday school quarterlies or commentaries. And what they would do, they would quote scripture. The church fathers may have had Bibles that are older than anything in existence today. So it is a resource that you can check, and sometimes you can find attestation for verses that no longer exist anywhere else. And see, these are bishops and scholars, so you would think that they would have quality materials, right? They'd have the best that was available. So we're getting quotes from these old manuscripts that no longer exist. Anyway, Griesbach says that some church fathers also used oikodomion. Tischendorf said that the original version of Codex D read oikodomain and then was corrected to oikodomion. Then he also listed several Latin manuscripts and other early translations into other languages like Ethiopic and Armenian and Georgian. These were translated in the 4th and 5th centuries, but they were translated from Bibles which no longer exist and may have preserved earlier readings. Alford said the Codex D read oikodomion, but he went with oikonomion because of the stronger manuscript evidence. So now, what are we going to do with this? Normally what I would do is if GLTTRAW say one thing and then there's only one that says something different, I would go with the GLTTRAW. But here's the cross-check. Let's see what fits the pattern. Verse 3, as I besought thee to abide still at Ephesus when I went into Macedonia, that thou mightest charge some that they teach no other doctrine, neither give heed to fables and endless genealogies, which minister questions rather than godly edifying which is in faith. And you might think, minister, oh, that's serve, isn't it? But if you look at the interlinear, the word minister is not there, it is bring. So, is there anything that fits the oikonomios or oikonomos and oikonomia pattern there? Servant, wise, faithful, responsibility, or mystery, ages, make known? There might be responsibility there, but it's kind of implied, right? But there's nothing there that fits that pattern very well. Well, what about the pattern for oikodomia? Romans 14:19 and 15:2. It's edification versus destruction via stumbling blocks. 1 Corinthians 3:9. Edification versus defilement of the temple via erroneous teachings. 1 Corinthians 14:3, 12, 3, 5, 12, and 26. Edification versus confusion. 2 Corinthians 10:8 and 13:10. Edification versus destruction. Ephesians 4:12 and 16. Edification versus every wind of erroneous doctrine. Ephesians 4:29. Edification versus corrupt communications. Now we look at this section in 1 Timothy 3, as I besought thee to abide still at Ephesus when I went into Macedonia, that thou mightest charge some they teach no other doctrine, neither give heed to fables and endless genealogies which minister questions, rather than godly edifying edification which is in faith. What fits? Oikodomia fits. So here, because of this method where we look for the associated terms, we can say with authority, it's not GLTTRAW, it is oikodomia. Isn't that something? Wow. And here we have just something really fascinating, that if I live long enough, I would love to do a Greek critical text utilizing this method. And I'd call it the Nestle text and drive everybody crazy. Because the other one's called the Nestle, but people mispronounce it. They call it the Nestle text. It's my name. I'm just using my name. What's wrong with that? But this gives us the ability to reach back into time even earlier than any text to see if things fit. Isn't that neat? There's just tremendous potential here. So I would say it should be oikodomia instead of oikonomia there. Now, are we finished? If we look at Englishman's Greek Concordance, or if we used the Young's Concordance, this would be the end of the list. But are we done yet? No. When you do a word study, what you want to do is you want to go back in the back to that concordance of variant readings, right? And you want to see if there are any textual variants that are using the word that you're studying, just in case. So now we go back to oikonomia, and let's see if there is a textual variant. Oikonomia, Ephesians 3:9 has oikonomia for koinonia, and then it says GLTTRAWWH, everybody else. So let's go Ephesians 3:9. Let's look at this. We would have missed one had we not gone to the back of that concordance. So here's a missing usage. Verse 9, and to make all men see what is the oikonomia, not koinonia, not fellowship, but administration of the mystery, which from the beginning of the ages hath been hid in God who created all things, to the intent that now the principalities and powers in heavenly places might know by the church the manifold wisdom of God, according to the eternal purpose which he purposed in Christ Jesus our Lord, in whom we have boldness and access with confidence by the faith of him. Which pattern does this fit? The second one, ages, make known, mystery. So what we have done is we have utilized contextual inference to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that oikonomia has two meanings. One of them means stewardship, but the other one means administration of an age. An administration. There are those who do not like dispensationalism, who say oikonomia has nothing to do with administrations. We've just proved them wrong. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, oikonomia has two meanings. One of them is stewardship, like a steward would take care of a household, as a leader would care for his people, give them meat in due season when they need it, to not abuse, to be faithful, to be wise. But the other ones, and we have 4 occurrences of it, it is indisputable that it is used in context with mystery, ages, and to make known something that was not known before. This is how you can decide what meanings, because you go to Thayer's dictionary, how do you know which one of those meanings to apply in the verse that you're studying? Is it the one you like? I'm sorry, but sometimes that does happen, right? How do you know for sure? Contextual inference. And this is not difficult, is it? No. This is the perfection of the Word, how the Word speaks louder for itself than anyone else could speak for it. It's the Word, and nothing but the Word. It explains its own terms. So now you can go to the dictionary, you can see which meaning it is by letting the contextual inference point the way, and you can say, it's this meaning with the same confidence of thus saith the Lord. Because the Word is like a treasure map, and it's precise. And you can have that precision, because that's what rightly dividing is. It's being able to say, this is this, and that is that. Digging at the right spot, so you get the treasure, and you don't just get dirt. It's just a pleasure to be able to share this stuff, because it's so simple. Anybody can do that, right? What you have to do, basically the process is, you sniff around every occurrence of the word. And you look at all the traits that have to do with that word. And what you do is you find the unit of context that word is used in, and you look at the whole unit of context so that you can let the contextual inference guide the way. Every word that I have studied in the last decade, I've seen the ability to do this.